Hello, everybody. Welcome to the podcast. I'm David Luke. I am an expert on the Agile Network as well as on the board of directors of the Agile Alliance. I've been doing transformations over product and agility and just general business transformations for about 15 or 20 years. And today I'm joined by three gentlemen that are associated with a company called Bloomfilter. They do process mining along with a myriad of other transformational activities. Let me turn it over to these gentlemen and let them introduce themselves.
Yeah, sure. I'll start. So, hey, everybody. David, thanks so much for having us. Eric Severinghouse, co-founder, co-CEO of Bloomfilter. I am not an expert on anybody's network, but I stayed in the Holiday Inn Express last night. I'm excited to be here and talk about this topic that we're very excited about. Andrew, do you want to maybe go next, and then we'll turn it over to Sam?
Yeah, I'm Eric's counterpart, co-CEO, co-founder of Bloomfilter. I head up our product and engineering, and I bring the Agile expertise here. And I did not stay at a Holiday Inn last night. So, Sam, you want to go?
Yeah, Sam Aborn. I run Partners and Alliances. I'm also the resident process geek and one of the co-authors of our process mining for SDLC book. And I live and breathe process, Lean Six Sigma, Master Black Belt, all that fun stuff. And I'm looking forward to the conversation today with David.
Awesome. Well, I will tell you one piece of housekeeping activity. The book that Sam just referenced, there's a link to it in the invite, and it's a free piece of information. We welcome you to click on it and download it and take a look in it. And it goes into pretty good depth of why process mining, how we use it in the SDLC. What is an open concept, which is observable, predictable, efficient, and nimble. And then what are the benefits and case studies of what process mining looks like. But, I'll be totally honest with you. Sam and I have worked together. We were both at Accenture a long time ago. And we worked on one of everybody's favorite gaming clients, Blizzard. You'll know them for World of Warcraft. And did a lot of Agile work there. And we connected this summer, and he was talking about, hey, there's this cool thing out there. It's called process mapping. It helps in transformation. You can, figure out just different things of how your process is working, where it's broken. It gives you a lot of empirical data and metrics on, how efficient your process is and stuff like that. And I'm like, dang, I wish I had this, years ago, because I've done a lot of transformations where, we've had to do that using journey maps and a lot of manual processes and not using any type of AI and those types of things. So, this is fantastic. I'm super happy to be partnered with these guys and with Process Mining and Bloomfilter Company. And I just wanted to kind of let's start it off by saying, what is the hypothesis or premise of leveraging process mapping to optimize speed, quality, and outcomes?
Yeah, I'll take this one. So, when you look at software development specifically, right? There are Atlassian says 15 different systems involved in up and down the stream, right? You got systems like AHA that do roadmap, and you got systems like Figma that do design management. You have systems like Jira and Asana that manage tasks and projects. You got GitHub managing SCM, source code management, up and down. We can keep naming all these systems. When you look at what's actually happening in your process, each one of these jobs, whether you're a project manager, scrum master, product owner, product manager, software engineer, et cetera, we can name the myriad of roles. They're doing their job in a system. And by getting into those systems, extracting the data, looking at the logs, the changes that occur in them, you can start to understand the process, right? As you alluded to, David, the way it used to work is I go into a room, I pull all the stakeholders in, and I start to interrogate the process by asking the people what's happening. Right. We know, because we're in sales cycles all the time, we ask people what's happening, and they give us a really good, beautiful picture of what's happening, and it's almost categorically wrong, because what you think is happening versus what's actually happening are two very wildly different things, as we've discovered. And so by looking into the logs and understanding this is what's actually happening, this is what your real process is, we can start to unlock insights that otherwise would be impossible to get if you had to do the old-fashioned way of asking people, going and asking other people and trying to glue together with sticky notes and value stream mappings and journey mappings that are ideal, but not necessarily the ground truth. And doing that across the myriad of roles and jobs that are done in software development is almost, as you know, an indomitable task of
Right.
how many people do I have to talk to and how many people are actually going to talk to me. I'd rather talk to a system, understand what is real, and work backwards from what's real than do it the old-fashioned way. And that's the advantage that I believe process mining and or process mapping, as you called it, gives us in our ability to understand the truth and what's actually happening.
I love that you came out with this is a system. I've always believed that everything that goes out the door from a company, or internally or externally, is in that system of delivery. Whether it's the outcomes to the customer or the internal outcomes to employees that are doing the work. I've always believed that it's a system of delivery. And with process mining, just like you said, it taps into each individual parts of that systems, and you can actually ask, what system is working here, or what system is working here, and then how do the systems all work together in the overall company ecosystem, and what does that look like? I love that you all believe in the system of delivery, and that is the ecosystem of a company, because they're living and breathing, right? Whether it's a small company or a giant company.
Yeah, we think about it even at a more fundamental level than that. We think that at the core, there's really three components that you need to be thinking about when you're thinking about transformation, right? You have a process translator, which is taking and executing and analyzing the strategy of the business. What are the outcomes being trying to be driven? And how does that relate to the financials? That's a process translator. And then the other side of the house is a process debugger. And that's where process mining comes in, as well as analytics and reporting, where we go through and start to understand what's going on within the process. And then we think the third leg of that stool, not just two, but three, is kind of a process performance coach. This is leveraging artificial intelligence, provide guidance on what actions you should take, what operational actions should be taken as a result of what's being discovered through either the process translation or the process debugging within the overall ecosystem for that organization. And I think that's one of the ahas when I came over, both as an investor and then ultimately as a member of the team, that really excited me what Bloomfilter was doing, is that we weren't looking at it just from what was occurring in the process, but we were looking at what was occurring in the business, and then what was occurring in terms of trying to drive operational change and transformation, like the work we did previously together, David, where we're trying to drive change in the behaviors of the teams, which is really core to Agile, is really that notion of changes in behaviors. And how does that all relate to the system overall?
Right. And I love that with the process mining, you can actually have metrics around those behaviors of what it looks like, whether it be, as an outcome comes down the pipe and it goes into a team, you can tell, is there a lot of rework here, or does that mean, it could mean a couple things. It could mean that the story needs to be split up, it's too big. It could be that maybe that story's not in the ready to actually come into the team, or it could mean different things. But at least you have a measurable piece of information that you can tie back to what is the root cause of why we're not being efficient in delivering those things. Eric, what do you think?
Well, the only part of this that I find fascinating is that this is oftentimes controversial, right? When we talk about these topics, our audience tends to break down into one of two camps. They're the ones that look at us and go, well, duh, of course, this makes sense. Software development's a business process. Businesses have lots of processes. Businesses have tools that they're using to analyze their processes and make their processes more efficient, right? And so we're fortunate because we get to talk to many customers that have things like process improvement COEs, of which Sam's been a part, and David, I think you've done some of this work.
Oh yeah.
And then we talk to certain other customer prospects who look at us like we have three eyes. And they say, no, man, that's not the way software development works. Like, it's artisanal. And we
Right.
don't want to enforce process. We don't want to analyze outputs. We don't want to understand what's happening. We'd rather we know that our data isn't perfectly clean, and so we'd rather not open that closet door and see how messy it is inside, right? And so this is the thing that I think is so interesting, David. I say this all the time, which is like the software industry has created process for everything around, from how we trade stocks to literally analytical systems to figure out, who should play right field for the Cleveland Guardians, and exactly where should they line up, like, to the foot in right field to optimize out percentage based on wind speed, handedness of batter, pitch thrown, et cetera, right? We have algorithms to optimize every process, no matter how creative and no matter how idiosyncratic. And
Right.
and the one place that we as software professionals tend to sometimes believe that we can't apply process to drive more efficiency is in our own house and in the world of, like, how we build software, which is just sort of the endlessly fascinating journey that we're on.
And I love that you say that. I love the reference to the Moneyball, right? I love that movie. That they took baseball from an art form to an empirical art form of what it looks like. This guy gets on base a lot more times, so we need him, and he's a lot cheaper than a Derek Jeter or somebody else like that. But so I love that. One thing I do want to touch on is there is a lot of folks out there that says Agile is dead. And let me tell you why they're saying that. It's because some of the executives aren't buying into the zealot version of Agile. And I think what process mining does is gives more teeth back to Agile and says, okay, we're using Agile processes, we're using Agile methodologies. Let me show you how efficient that is, because I can mine all the processes and show you how efficient that process is to get outcomes. And it gives them
Yeah.
something to hold on to.
Well, and so it's funny. Like, Andrew, Sam, and I tend to be like the three legs of the stool. I end up playing like business executive. Andrew ends up playing technology executive, and Sam ends up playing COE lead a lot of times, and sort of
Right.
like the three legs of the stool here. And maybe I'll give like the quick perspective from the like operator strategy CEO seat, having operated in these seats in a lot of different businesses. Nobody thinks Agile's dead in the context of like when you think about what Agile does, right? It breaks down your work unit and it tries to create smaller work units that are then more repeatable in terms of how it moves through the factory floor of software
Right.
development. If we want to use like a Taylorist analogy, right? Nowhere does the business executive think that's dumb and we should like throw that baby out with the bathwater, right? What the business executive tends to be thinking when they say Agile's dead is we have these meetings with these zealots who say things like, I can't plan beyond a 2-week increment. And so I know, Mr. Executive, you want a marketing budget for the next quarter or the next half or the next fiscal year, but I can't tell you when we're going to ship that, right? And the business executive goes, what? That doesn't make any sense, right? And
Right.
and and, and so this idea, like the parts of Agile that make it more predictable and constrain the work unit size and that make it more responsive to customer demands, I think everybody like uniformly gets really excited about. The weird thing is there has become this like cultish sort of like response, which is like, no, we're not going to do that. Like, that is not part of what we believe to be part of the remit of Agile. And so
Right.
we're not going to work hard to figure out how do we align with the other stakeholders and the other needs of the business. And that's where I think justifiably, the business executives end up with a hell of a lot of frustration.
Yeah, and it
Yeah.
has to be a combination of art and science, right?
Yeah, absolutely. As I say, Agile's dead. Long live Agile. The thing is I believe for at least a decade, probably two, since I been working in this field, people try to jam in these common practices, these best practices
Right.
into businesses, and they fail. And then the zealots will tell you, well, Agile didn't fail, you failed Agile. It's like, well, that doesn't make any sense. And I think what the reality is Agile is going to work when it can meet the business, right? When we work with customers, they're very rarely in the business of doing software, right? They're in the business of selling food. They're in the business of supply chain. They're in the business of whatever they happen to be in the business of. Software happens to be an enabler for that. And
Right.
so the process in which software development gets done and the process of which they deliver value to the market, it has to fit there. And whether that's 2-week sprints or 3-week sprints, or you're doing safe and you're doing program increments, whatever it looks like. And there's probably no real good prescription because every business operates in a unique way, or they wouldn't be a valid business, right? They wouldn't have a competitive advantage. And so Agile has to actually meet the remit of Agile. Agile has to stop failing Agile by meeting the business where it's at, understanding what is our core use case, and adapting the software process in a way that, one, to Eric's point, de-risks the software development process because it's very risky if you try to do it in huge increments. But at the same time, meeting the business where it needs to be able to deliver value to its customers and to the market itself.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I jump on top of this one as well. Agile's dead, long live Agile. I think you have to think about it from the cone of uncertainty, right? I mean, at the end of the day, Agile allows you to manage the cone of uncertainty different than waterfall and then all the way on the other end of Kanban. But what we see when we go out and do process mining of the SDLC is that no one's executing consistently anyways. They could say they're Agile, but they're Agile in name only. They could say they're Kanban. I think one of our favorite examples is someone was running a Kanban project. We went through and did the analysis, and their Kanban boards all moved on Friday, all with 1 second per task. Couldn't even be developed that quickly. And so one of the things that we do is we bring that transparency to that business process from a process mining perspective. And so for my kind of COE process transformation hat, I look at it and I go, fit for purpose, right? But also don't make it up. Like I saw something the other day where someone was estimating a Kanban task. That's not the purpose of it, right? So what you should be doing is you should be planning the task and saying, all right, we think we're going to do roughly this amount based on our throughput and our throughput and our time on and our cycle time. Like we need to be doing the right math. And I think that's one of the things that we get distracted by is we get forced into the wrong math. Measure the velocity of Kanban. I mean, a number of executives have told me that. It's just like, you can't measure the velocity of Kanban. It's not the right metric. And I think that's one of the challenges that we face as an industry and as individuals is that we're taught a set of things, but we're not taught how to tailor those things to the particular context. And so we try to force fit the wrong things together. And for us, like we've come up with a framework from a process mining perspective, we call it open. Can you make your process observable? Can you make it predictable? Can you make it efficient? Can you make it nimble? It doesn't matter your SDLC in order to achieve those 4 outcomes, but that's what we should be anchoring as a practice and as practitioners around is can we get to that outcome of an open SDLC process and avoid this kind of artisan craft stuff. So along with Andrew and Eric, like process translator, process debugger, make it open and embrace it. And what we see is when organizations actually embrace that modality, it solves the business problem question and it starts reviving Agile because it starts reviving the fact that we're focused on business outcomes and not software for the sake of software and process for the sake of process.
Amazing.
I'll get off my soapbox for a minute.
let me take just a slight curve. And when I start talking about process mining with Agilists or product folks or stuff like that, I always get the question, how is a process mining transformation different than like our traditional, Agile transformation or SDLC transformation or things like that? What are you seeing or what are you observing is kind of the core differences that clients can experience as they do process mining transformations as opposed to traditional Agile transformations?
Yeah, I mean, it starts with first principles, right? When people make process changes today, they say, hey, we want to increase velocity. What they're doing is they're going to change their process to increase velocity, right? That just makes sense. But when people say, well, what's different between you and Jira? Well, Jira is looking at the task itself and saying your velocity went up, it went down. What it won't tell you is all the things that happen to that task that cause your velocity to go up,
Right.
that cause it to go down, right? And by starting at the first principle of what's actually happening in the process, you can start to interrogate, oh, I made this change and now I've had a negative effect. I'm failing QA more because I asked people to move quicker during development. And you can see that across tasks, across the process itself. And so by being able to interrogate the process, you have better control over the levers you're choosing to pull. And you're also going to better understand, there is no free lunch where I pull the velocity lever and everything's up and to the right and I'm winning all the time, no matter what, right? You increase velocity, number of test coverage might go down, the number of documentation might go down, right? Like there's different measures that go down correspondingly to velocity going up.
Right.
And by looking at the process, you can start to understand why that's the case. You can better tailor the way you make your changes, become abundantly more purposeful in the changes you make. So you don't say, I'm going to increase velocity by 10. You say, well, I can only afford to increase it by 5 because my quality goes down too low if I increase it by more than that. And you can start to understand the cause and effect, right? And when you can understand the cause and effect, you're better able to change manage. You're better able to communicate what exactly you're trying to do and why you're trying to do it. And you could also communicate for the first time the side effect it's going to have in your other measures that people don't even tend to think about, because it would be nearly impossible in the systems we have today without process mining to understand those second and third order effects that changes might make happen.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I would add to that the fundamental question around the transformation changes. So the transformation, when you talk about an agile transformation, you're trying to go in an agile direction, it's how to become more agile. When you start with process mining, the question is, what business outcome am I trying to get to that's different? What business strategy is starting to be different? And so you start with a fundamentally different question, which gets you to a fundamentally different answer. The other thing is you move away from highest paid person's opinion. You're killing the hippos, right? Because at the end of the day, what we've got analytics and insights. And so the hippo is no longer the person who's dictating the direction, the data is dictating the direction, which then makes it much easier to transform an organization because the individuals believe in the data versus believing in the person's opinion. And so those are two factors that kind of start to tie it together that make the transformation different. The other thing is, because it's not deployed as a diagnostic tool, it's deployed as an operational tool, it changes the nature of the operation so that your retrospectives are powered differently, your conversations are powered differently, and you're changing almost the culture from anecdotes to analytics when you're talking about driving increased performance to get to the outcome of increased outcomes versus just pure increased velocity.
Eric, let me ask you this from the executive point of view, the same question. A lot of executives have, transformational fatigue. They're like, I don't want to do this again. I've been through it 10 times. And how do you talk to them about how a process mining transformation is different?
Yeah. I think the place that we start, David, is it has a business case, right? So before we go talk to or very early in our conversation with the customer, we want to understand, we look for some really basic analytics, and we start to look at some signals like rework and cycle time, which, by the way, no matter what process modality you're running, hopefully we can all agree that rework is bad and long cycle times are bad, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if we look at some really basic process analytics like that, we can really quickly put together a high level business case that says, if you improve the process, here's how you can unlock savings and here's how you can be more efficient. Now, this is not revolutionary stuff. Every other business process center of excellence does this as they
Right.
go get funding to transform a process, right? But we just got off the phone with a customer that's got about 1,000 engineers. We think that there's a $20 to $30 million unlock in the next year if we can, eliminate 15% of the rework, and we can do that by making some of the process better. And
Awesome.
the data is right there; it's very clear. It starts with a business process. Or it starts with a business value assessment that we can show and we can get buy-in, and then we go execute it, and we're not doing Agile for Agile's sake. We're not doing it because we heard a seminar by a famous speaker and we got rah rah and we decided that's the way to do it. We're doing it because there's business value associated with it and there's efficiency improvement that we're going to get out of it. And then we hold ourselves accountable over time and through that transformation to say, are we reducing rework? Is cycle time coming down? Are these various diagnostics that we're looking at moving in the right direction as we execute this transformation? And that's why, David, is, as you know, software is but a piece of it, right? So you
Right.
need the observability, you need the visibility that comes from process mining. That's cool. It gives a completely different lens and a completely different opportunity to observe what's happening. But then the magic really comes when you combine it with great agile practitioners, right? So
Yep.
folks such as yourself, this is why Sam is such a valuable member of our team, is when you complement, hey, here's all these insights, here's all these takeaways with, and by the way, I've got some pattern recognition. I've seen this before. And like we've got an AI coach that does some of this, but man, nothing replaces the human element of
Right.
having somebody who's seen the anti-patterns before and says, here's how we go make it better. And then you get into that virtuous feedback loop of let's go make a change, let's measure it, let's come back a couple months later. What do you know? Measure going up, efficiency improving, executive happy, right? Like it's like
Right.
that old it's like that old career builder monkey slide where like
Right.
the like monkey takes it and like flips the chart 90 degrees in order to make the number go up and to the right, right? Like that's all it takes is like show the business exec like efficiency going up and to the right, and like the pointy hair boss will shut up and let you do your job.
Right. And I think that's the part of long live agile. It's because that they can actually have something to hold on to rather than, oh, I'm going to spend, $30 million or however much they spend. And when they ask, what is my return on investment? You're like, you'll be more efficient and your teams will be happier. No, nobody's buying that anymore. Nobody's buying that. And so I love this fact that not only can you use it in an agile mode, but I mean Kanban. You can use it in your waterfall processes or any other type of processes that you're running in your organization. It just doesn't have to be this, where you can actually inventory your process, make your process more efficient and your outputs and outcomes more tangible. And if you're more efficient, your speed to market, your quality, and your market share are all going to increase.
Yeah, and agile is like many other philosophies in the sense that like in some ways agile never fails, we only fail agile, right? And so we all have like our own interpretation of what does agile mean, and if we put agile up here as like generally good, and then like we can come up with all these behaviors and be like, well, that's an abomination, that's a bastardization of agile anyway, right? But
Right.
like my personal favorite one of this is we see all the time the importance of slow down and go talk to the customers and understand the requirements before you go and build, because it's orders of magnitude more expensive to rebuild something than to build
Yep.
it right the first time, right?
Oh yeah.
And by the way, agile, we'll talk, like if you reread the agile manifesto, I'm sure we've all read it, if you reread it, right, it gets into make sure that what you're shipping has business value. How do you make sure what you're shipping has business value? We'll go talk to users, dummy, right? That's the only way to be sure that your
Right.
assumptions are actually grounded in truth, right? But like we we sometimes forget that, and we interpret philosophies like agile to be like we're just going to build and ship fast, we are going to worship velocity of ship at all costs, right?
Yep.
And like and so we'll come up with these insights which will be like, hey bro, if you slow down a little bit and you talk to your customers and you get the requirements right, then you're not going to end up rebuilding all these modules, right? And then if you go talk to the engineers, they'll look at you and they'll go, yeah, I knew what I was building was dumb, but it was what I was on the card and it was what I was told to build, right? and
Yep.
and so like, hey, no, let's actually put the brakes on that, and let's make sure that like before we go build it, we've got the requirements well understood. That doesn't mean waterfall, right? That doesn't mean like a
No.
2-year requirements gathering PRD process. But what it does mean is getting back to the roots of hey, what is it that we're building? Why are we building it? What are the requirements? All that kind of stuff. So that when we ultimately go through all that downstream effort, it ends up being highly efficient.
Well, that's one of the things I loved about your book is that you touched on that. I had a client once that they were operating in a scaled module or a scaled model, and their metrics were phenomenal. They were hitting everything. Their velocities were great. Their RTEs were happy and everything like that. But nobody was buying their stuff. And it was because they weren't talking to the customer. They were shipping all this stuff that nobody used. And so they were building all this useless stuff. And I'm like, well, you guys have built me the most beautiful dress imaginable. Too bad I don't wear dresses. And so that's the feedback loop is important just as much as the throughput and the outcomes and everything like that. Just putting that back into the loop. And if you start to measure process, you can see a lot of that rework. Are we having to do the same thing again because this is not what the customer wanted? It was something a little bit different, and we're going to gain even more market share if we do things like that.
Yeah, I'm going to put Wolf on the spot. Wolf, what is the most demotivating thing that an engineer can do? We'll see if he comes up with what I guess his answer is going to be.
Oh, you ship something no one uses. That's like the worst. Like I wasted my time. I wasted money. I wasted everyone's time because no one used it. It's the absolute worst thing you can do.
Yeah, David, we get this like developer experience lens of, oh my God, we're gonna hurt the developer's feelings if we measure the process efficiency, right? And man, every developer to a man that I've ever talked to, and like Andrew, Sam, and I have all written code for a living at different points in our career. Yeah. I've never met a single developer that says, well, what I really love doing is writing stuff that nobody's ever going to use and that we're going to end up shelving, right? Like, oh yeah. If we can get that part of the process right, it is the single biggest impact we can have on developer psychology and developer experience.
And the best part about this is the most rewarding thing you can do is also the inverse of that. When I ship something that I know everyone uses, that customers texted me, "Dude, this is the best thing that you've ever done." Like that feels good, and it motivates me to ship even more software. Like, boy, I want everyone to use my stuff, right? That's how you improve developer experience, right? Not by not measuring the process, ignoring it.
Right. I'll go back to something that you said earlier, and I think as Andrew, you said it, is that the companies that we deal with are not in the software business. It's just an enabler to get their product to their business, to their customers faster. I had a pizza chain that was one of the early adopters of mobile apps, and their developers were building these cool mobile apps and putting it out, but nobody could use it because they were so complex. And you had the pizza, you couldn't really customize it so much, and the specials weren't on there and things like that. And it was really demotivating to not only our onshore developers but our offshore developers of, hey, this is I know this is it's a world-class app, but they aren't using it because it's so confusing. And like you said before, that's super demotivating. It's like, well, why don't you tell me what they want? And let's talk to the customers. And no matter how efficient your process is, if you're not building the right stuff for the customers that they're going to use, you're going to suffer not only in internal demotivation, but you're going to lose market share because folks aren't going to use your stuff.
Well, absolutely. And when you look at it and you don't measure that part of the process, that's one of the black boxes. Right. Like, if you think development's a black box, ask what's happening in your design and a product process. I guarantee you, like, at least you have velocity. It might not be a good number in development, but you have some numbers. Over there are no numbers. And when you talk about the pizza app, what do people want to do when they load your app? They want food. They're hungry, right? They want the quickest route between like you and getting food in their stomach. So do that, right? But you have to measure that, right? And you have to know, are we building the thing that our customers want, which is food, right? They don't want a mobile app. The mobile app is a means to an end to what they want.
Exactly.
And part of the whole process mining thing is understanding failure doesn't occur because some developer somewhere didn't do his job. Failure occurred because the executive said, we need a world-class application. And the product guy says, oh, world-class, that means cool experiences and like drag and drop. And the designer says, oh man, look at all the cool widgets I can put on the screen. And then the engineer builds it, and then it goes to production. And QA says, I have no idea how to test this thing. There's too much going on. QA passes, it gets into production, and no one uses it. But if you had measured up front that, hey, wait a minute, what are we trying to do here? And you go through and you start to realize, oh, wait, the failure occurred way up here in the boardroom rather than in development. And you understand the SDLC is a whole company effort. It changes the game and changes the way people can look at the problems and actually come and troubleshoot them where they actually occur, not where we think they're occurring.
Can I add
One of my early,
Can I add one more of that, David? Do you mind?
yeah,
So I love Andrew's like failure does not occur because of that, right? The other thing that, man, I see all the time that like just makes me want to like, I don't know, run up a wall is failure does not occur based on the number of seconds or minutes that transpire between code commit and like live and deployed and ready, right? When we think of like certain measures of DevOps, like we are measuring the last link. It's like we're measuring like the last 100 yards of a marathon. And we say we are going to optimize this 100 yards using various different measures. And we are going to be so good at that final 100 yards of the marathon. And like, never mind whether or not we sprained our ankle on like mile 1, right?
right.
And like, it's just like, the other one I would add to what Wolf said is failure doesn't occur because of that. Like when failure occurs, 78% of software is laid over budget or doesn't ship at all. The reason that happens has nothing to do with the last hour of your DORA metrics. It has to do with how the requirements were gathered, how the team understands them, how it was scoped, how it was prototyped, how it was initially engineered and architected. That's where failure occurs. You just don't realize it until 6 months later.
Right. Right. One of my product mentors always told me, he's like, you have to decide what you want to be, what portions you want to be world class in, what part you want to be table stakes in, and what part really doesn't matter. I had a company that was like, we really want to work on our login process. And I'm like, do you really want to be world class in login? Not really. You just want to be with everybody else. And so that's kind of where that comes in from the design and the product and the actual delivery. Let me shift a little bit. I know we're coming up on time. Let's talk about tooling a little bit. I know that a lot of companies that we work with, they have a Jira or an Align or a version 1 or things like that. How does, Bloomfilter work to kind of integrate into those tools as well as GitHub and other things like that? And, do folks have to have a myriad of tools, or what does that look like when we come and talk to them about using process mining and Bloomfilter specifically?
Yeah, when we talk about integration, we talk about what problem are you trying to solve, right? Are you trying to understand better how your tasks move through your process? Well, then you only need Jira. Congratulations. Like, let's go talk, right? If you need to understand how a support ticket gets originated in Salesforce, moves into a different system, ends up in Jira for development, ends up in GitHub, and then deployed, and when that bug is deemed fixed in production, well, that's a whole lot of different tickets. And the use cases and the problems organizations are trying to solve run the gamut of those, right? There's all the way from very simple to very complex. And because we're focused on using process mining to solve business problems, we're not necessarily focused on what systems we need to integrate. But the way we think about integration is common data model, right? We have tasks, we have repositories, we have all the things you think would occur in the common nomenclature that we have internally. So it doesn't matter what system you have, because we just put it into our common data model, and then we work off our common data model to apply our process mining techniques. So we don't we're kind of system agnostic in the way we think about the problem. But again, it's not about number of integrations you need. It's like, what problem are you trying to solve, and where do we need to go to get the data to solve that problem?
Awesome. I love it. Let me touch on one more thing. There's been a couple of podcasts that I've seen on the Agile Network and also around that, the efficiency of retros. And Sam and I had an interesting conversation yesterday about, anecdotal versus empirical use of data in retros. Sam, let's talk about how we use the data and the metrics that we get from process mining, and how they are very valuable to doing retros.
Yeah, so it changes the conversation fundamentally, right? But the other thing it does is it allows you to look across retros, right? So as you're starting to think about overall performance, you can start looking at what is the trend overall. Hey, we've got this challenge over in this team versus that team. One of the things that the power of process mining gives you is the ability to do comparisons to understand whether or not you even have the same teams executing the same processes. So rather than almost like the Scrum of Scrums model, you can do the retro of retros model, where you can actually understand organizationally what's going on versus these one-off silos of improvement, which will unlock the overall transformation. Back to the notion of opening up your SDLC. Imagine if you took the power of improvement across every one of your teams, aggregated it together, and everyone was working on trying to fix the same thing at the same time. That's the power of process mining, to be able to unlock that in a way in which that you can't do when you've got one by one by one by one. It also doesn't have to be done in a Scrum Master model as well, right? A lot of people move to like kind of the self-run teams. And in the self-run teams, you're now providing that same rudder steer, start, stop, continue across the organizational perspective. All though anchored in business strategy. Remember, we talked about translating process translator, right? Performance translator and process debugger. Retro is a mechanism for process debugging, but it always has to be anchored back to strategy. And that's the key to it that I think is really different from a transformation perspective, is that need for that linkage back to it, right? No one runs a software company inside of a large brand like a food company or that in order to be efficient. They run it in order for the outcome. And then they want to achieve the efficiency overall in the way in which they're delivering it. Really, how effective are they being? And what process mining does is it shifts the conversation all the way up to the linkage to business strategy, which didn't exist before.
Right. And I love that you can tie empirical things in your retros back to transforming your ways of working. It's not just theory of, hey, this team did this and this team did this. How can we change our ways of working? Well, I don't know, because every team is different. Now you actually have something, like you said, to anchor to, of this is what we're experiencing across all of these teams, and this is where the process is broken. Let's change our ways of working to fix that process and see, like you said earlier, Andrew, let's pull this lever and see what it does to our throughput and through our metrics, and it's measurable. I love that part. Let's see. We're running up on time, but are there any cool case studies that you guys have seen recently that we can share with everybody? I mean, we don't have to talk about the brand. We can just talk about the general product.
My favorite. Maybe we do a rapid fire real quick. My favorite. You can see this one on our website. You go to Intrusion on our website. Publicly traded company. What Myron says on the video is we fundamentally changed the way both his CEO and Wall Street looks at how they're building software there. And we did that by giving them observability in the process, a series of measures that they could see the business value of what they were investing in. David, the coolest set of case studies that we're seeing so far. So we've had this platform in process for I don't know, about a year now, in terms of since our general availability release date. Almost every one of our early customers that has really implemented Bloomfilter and taken the results and started using them and driving process change and process improvement, I think we are batting something close to 1,000 in terms of our customers getting promoted and getting more responsibility underneath them. What's really amazing is when the VPs start using Bloomfilter and they start using it to improve the process and then show their executives how they're holding themselves accountable to that process improvement, the executives almost universally say, man, that's awesome. can you take on like 5 more teams and go do that same thing? And so we are seeing that pattern play out over and over and over again. I think our next white paper, our next ebook is going to be how to get yourself a promotion by using the power of process mining.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And that's a true testament, right? You know,
Absolutely.
keep your executives happy and keep moving your company forward.
Yeah, and by the way, it doesn't hurt if you move your own career forward in the process either. Right?
Correct. Correct. Awesome. Well, thank you all for being on the podcast today. This was amazing. I just want to also mention that in the invite, there's a link to Bloomfilter website where you can see all of those case studies and kind of do a little bit more exploring. And then and Eric and Andrew and Sam have graciously given us access to the ebook. So that link is in there too.
And we even turned off the email gating for you all, despite the objections of our marketing team. So you can even get it without us following up with you if you want.
Awesome. Awesome. And if you have any questions, reach out to myself or to Eric or Andrew or Sam, and we'd be happy to have a conversation and direct you to the right folks. But yeah, this is the way that transformations are going to evolve. I'm positive of it because, I'm an analytical geek as well as, an artistry type person and a business person. And this just makes sense to me of how we can do things, do it in a proof of concept, then expand it and work through your organization and use it in different parts of your organization. It just doesn't have to be in software. We can do it everywhere. Thanks, gentlemen. We really appreciate it.
So much fun. And thanks for the opportunity.
Have a wonderful day.
Thanks.
You too. Thank you. Bye.